adjustment for July 24th, 2024. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Chair, before we start, we want to go through study session.
I'm sorry, what?
Before we go into the public hearing, we got study session first on the agenda?
Yes, does he still need to do a roll call?
That's the first item on the agenda. Can we have a roll call?
Yes, but we're in study session.
Oh, we are in study session. Oh, I thought it was 1 o'clock. Okay. My apologies.
It's okay. We're all muted.
Yeah, okay. The study session. Can we have,
Can I get the next slide, please?
yeah, okay, Mark, please.
There we go. We got it. Okay, welcome everybody to the Board of Adjustment study session. Looking up on the agenda for next month, August 28th, it does look like we have two cases. First one is a self-storage facility, a new self-storage facility located at 322 South Wilmot Road. They would be asking variances for, just actually one variance to reduce the width of a parking area access lane. The other case that we would have next month is for 2406 East Hawthorne Street, and that's a residence that's converting an existing garage into an ADU. The variances that they would be seeking is a deletion of the required setback and for increasing the building height of the ADU. Looking at today's case, we have our first case is going to be C10 24-02 Solana Springs Apartments, new shed, and that one's located at 6340 South Santa Clara Avenue. Can I get the next slide, please? So this property is located near Valencia and I-19. It's behind the old South Gate. I think it's called the South Gate shopping center. It's now been converted into a school. This property itself was an apartment complex that was constructed prior to the implementation of the land use code. So this was built approximately in 1982. And what's unique about this project is that the parking as it exists right now is non-conforming for the required number of parking spaces. So before the land use code and unified development code, the amount of parking spaces that were required at the time equal to, I think it was 229 spaces, I believe. Right now they have 249 spaces. And as you can see on the aerial there, they're proposing to put a 200 square foot tough shed up in the northwest corner. The main purpose for that is for maintenance and storage of supplies that would be utilized on the site. There's really no other logical location to put this tough shed, simply because there's no accessibility. There wouldn't be any accessibility to it from anywhere else on the site other than in the parking area. So at a minimum, this shed would be deleting 3 parking spaces. And so what's triggering the variance is that they're reducing the number of already non-conforming number of parking spaces from 229 to 226. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually 249 to 246. So there's the actual variance request, is to allow the construction of the new shed in the parking area that will result in a reduction of the non-conforming number of parking spaces from 249 to 246 spaces. We did not receive any objections or approvals from the public comment period. And staff supports the request to grant the variance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Yes, Mr. Castro, I would have a question or just a clarification, and partially due to the acoustics. Let me just repeat what I think you said, that there are 249 spaces now, and there would be a reduction of 3, so there would be 246 spaces. And that's a reduction from the existing, but not a reflection of what the code requires. The development is non-conforming, so when it was built or went through the review process, I think you said 1982, did you say there was no required number of spaces in the code at that point in time?
So, Mr. Marks, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So there was a, when this apartment complex was constructed, it was 1982. The parking at that time was different parking requirements. It was, I think it was like 268 spaces that was required. And right now they have 249 space. I'm sorry, I'm thinking, hold on. Give me one moment, I can pull up the number here.
There must have been,
So there was, at the time, the 228 spaces were required.
20.
It's on the staff report on page 3 for your reference.
So if there was a requirement of 220 spaces, wouldn't they be in compliance with just that number? So don't they exceed the required amount? Or is the required number changed because we're dealing with a reduction? And so we must start with the current code requirement?
So what's triggering this is because we're dealing with new construction. And so with new construction, we look at current code regulations. And because of that, we look at the parking as well. And so based on current code requirements, that would require obviously a lot, more spaces, but it's already non-conforming as it is. So even though they're eliminating the number of spaces to 3, by 3 spaces, because it's a non-conforming or the number of required parking spaces, it would require a variance. And that's why the applicant is here before us.
Okay.
Mr. Castro, I have a couple of questions. If we were to approve this variance, that would mean that this property is still non-conforming with respect to the number of parking spaces?
That is correct.
So my question is, and it's going to be similar for the next case as well, is why didn't the applicant get advised to perhaps ask for an individual parking plan rather than to continue a non-conforming use?
That's a good question. The reason why they cannot use an individual parking plan is because this is because it is non-conforming for the number of required parking. So that is why they need a variance in order to modify that requirement.
So that option is not available because it's non-conforming.
That's correct.
Okay.
yeah, parking plans are usually for newer projects that can't conform to parking requirements, particularly those downtown, and if they have a parking plan, then they can get around those requirements.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking that is my understanding is that the IPP is an administrative process where the minimum number of required motor vehicle spaces on a new or existing site can be reduced below the Unified Development Code. So you're saying because it's non-conforming, they can't even apply for that?
If I may, Commissioner Paulus and members of the board, I asked this same question when I was reviewing this case, so this is a really good question, and I'm glad you're asking it. There's some language in the code, and I don't have it open right in front of me right now, but essentially to opt into the IPP, it would require the parking lot to meet current code standards, not just for the number of parking spaces. I mean, an IPP is used to reduce your number of required parking spaces, so they would be in conformance if they reduced the number, but it would also require them to be conforming for other aspects of the parking lot. So that would require things like, is it properly, have the right slope right now? Does it have the landscaping that's required per today's code? So that would be things like a tree for every 6 parking spaces. Does it have the pedestrian circulation that's required? Does it have the correct, crosswalks, all of those things? And because this is a non-conforming site, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to trigger all of those requirements for this site just because they want to put the storage in and remove 3 spaces. So it seemed that the variance was a more appropriate track for them in their request and the scope of what they were trying to accomplish with the project. But that is absolutely a very good question, because Mark and I had this very same discussion before this case went on the agenda, because I asked the same thing. I was like, oh, an administrative process, but it makes sense just because of the non-conforming status of the property, and allowing them to maintain that status is the least burdensome approach for the applicant at this point.
Any other questions on this case? Can I get the next slide, please? And for our second case today, we have C-10-2404, Norgord Interior Remodel. Property is located at 443 South Stone Avenue. This is a similar variance request regarding parking. This site located at the southeast corner of Stone Avenue and 15th Street. It's a completely developed site, as you can see at the aerial. And what this project consists of is an interior remodel of an existing building to accommodate group dwelling use. The previous use, according to public records and what I could find on Pro, was that it was some sort of administrative office for the Tucson Symphony. And then there was a retail store component to it as well, and that would be on the south side of the building. So what's triggering the variance request is because of the change of use from a commercial use to a residential use group. And so now that they have to provide parking off street, and as I mentioned earlier, the site is fully developed and cannot accommodate parking. And because this project is located in the Armory Park Historic District, we know that any property that is contributing to the historic district cannot be modified or demolished, and it's not something that we would support. So really their only option is to seek a variance to delete the parking, the required parking for the site, which would be 8 parking spaces based on the proposed amount of residents for this project, and which I believe is going to be 12 residents. So given that information, can I get the next slide, please? So given that information, the one variance that they're asking again is to delete the required number of motor vehicle parking spaces that's required on site. And it's and at this time, staff does not object to those, it does not object to that variance request. To date, we did receive one protest, and that was provided to you via email. So you should have a copy of that. That's the only protest we received for this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
I have the same question about an individual parking plan. And since this is not a non-conforming use, wouldn't an IPP make more sense for this particular parcel so that off-street parking might be assigned to them in some way that I don't see a way for us to do through a variance?
Ms. Paulus and Mr. Chair, members of the board. So this is another one that we kind of went back and forth on. So, but because essentially that they're asking for a total deletion of the required parking. We felt that it was more appropriate to go through a variance process to seek a deletion on the number of required parking spaces, and to have a little bit more public participation involved in that. So that's the reason for that it went through the variance process.
And Mark, what is the requirement for that particular use? Is that number of residents, number of beds, number of units, one per or 1.5 per? Do you know what the specific requirement for parking on site is on a project like that?
So it comes out to half a space per resident, and there's 12 residents. Plus the on-site resident, right, and that's 2 spaces. And then it comes out to a total of 8.
One more question that I have. If in the future, the land use on this particular property changes again, but it remains residential, does the variance follow with the property? Or if the use changes, does that mean that the variance goes away? I'm a little bit unsure about what that process is.
Ms. Paulus and Mr. Chair, members of the board. So if the change of use is still residential and the requirement is the same or less than what the variance was approved for, that's something that that we would still honor. That's correct.
Mr. Castro, I skimmed the letter of opposition and I believe the opponent is saying that there's no on-street parking there without a permit required. Is that correct?
I did not see any kind of permit required for parking along that street, at least in front of that building or adjacent to that building.
So all the parking would then utilize whatever parking is available on the street.
It would be open to the public.
Mhm.
It's in the right of way, so that's public parking.
Okay, and could you repeat the number that's required?
It's 8 spaces are required,
8 spaces.
8 spaces.
And are there 8 spaces on the street in the immediate area?
Yes, there is. And that's also noted on the site plan that was provided by the applicant or submitted by the applicant. It shows the number of spaces that immediately abut the site.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Chair, we can go ahead and conclude the study session and then start the public hearing at 1:30. We have to wait till 1:30. Mr. Chair, I have 1:30 now. We can get started.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the, excuse me, my list, okay. City of Tucson Board of Adjustments for, July 28th, 24th, pardon me, 2024. Can we have a roll call, please?
I apologize, 1 second, thank you.
Can't hear you.
Bruce Dawson,
Here.
Miranda Schubert is absent. Michael Marks,
Here.
Irma Duran,
Here.
Bonnie Paulus.
Present?
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I remind the people who may be presenting or in the audience that we have a minimum quorum, which means that any motion that is presented to board must be passed by unanimous vote. Okay, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the regular meeting of the City of Tucson's Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being recorded. By joining, you are giving consent for this meeting to be recorded. An introduction of each case will be made by staff. At the conclusion of staff's presentation, the applicant or the applicant's representative will have the opportunity to speak. For the record, please tell the board your name and address and state your request. At the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, other persons wishing to speak in favor of the request may come forward and state their support. When called by the chair or of the board who's wishing to speak in opposition to the applicant's request may come forward and state their protest. The chair may allow the applicants an opportunity for a brief rebuttal. The chair will then close the public hearing and open up a discussion by the board members. At the conclusion of the board's discussion, a motion will be made and, if seconded, will then be voted upon. All presentations today will be directed solely to the board and not to staff or to members of the audience. All presentations to the board must also be only on those items brought before the board. Presentation on matters unrelated to the request will not be heard. The discussion of the Board of Adjustments may be appealed to the Superior Court of Pima County by filing a complaint for the special action of the Pima County Superior Court's Clerk's Office within 30 days of the board's decision. For additional information on the filing process, please contact the Superior Court Clerk's Office or an attorney after today's public hearing. If you are going to give testimony today, please be brief and to the point. Repetition of testimony already given by other witnesses is not necessary. The board may invoke a time limit if deemed necessary. Before you testify, please remember to sign in on the roster sheet of the board podium. If you are joining us remotely, please state your name and address for the record. All testimony to the board must be given under oath. If you are going to speak or think you may speak today, please stand at this time and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Thank you. A reminder, please turn all cell phones off or to silent mode. If you are joining us remotely, please be sure to mute yourself and turn your camera off unless you are addressing the board. Mr. Castro, please call our first case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Our first case is C10-24-02 Solano Springs Apartments New Shed, Bridge Investment Group Holdings LLC, 6340 South Santa Clara Avenue, R3. The applicant's property is an approximately 6.58 acre site zone R3 residential and is developed with a 2-story apartment complex. The applicant is proposing to construct a new storage shed in the designated parking area. The applicant is seeking the necessary zoning approval to allow the construction, which would eliminate approximately 3 existing motor vehicle parking spaces. The applicant is requesting the following variance: allow the construction of the new shed in the parking area, which will result in the reduction of the non-conforming number of motor vehicle parking spaces from 249 to 246 spaces, all as shown on the submitted plans. The engineering section of Planning and Development Services Department has no objection or adverse comments. Planning and Development Services staff has no objection to the applicant's requested variance. It is the opinion of staff that there are special circumstances applicable to the property and that the reduction of the non-conforming number of parking spaces would not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and zone, and would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood. Today, we have received a total of 0 approvals and 0 protests. Mr. Chair, members of the board, this concludes staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? There being none, I will now open the floor to anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this motion, of this case.
Mr. Chair, we have,
Can I speak at this point? Can I be heard?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
My name is Thomas Guido, and I represent the applicant, and I'm here to answer any questions that the board might have. I think staff has done a very good presentation as to what we're looking for and why we're here. If there's any further questions, I'm happy to help out.
Are there any questions?
I have one question. There is in our packet information about the letter you sent for a neighborhood meeting, but I don't see any of the results of that meeting. Were members present who are renters of the complex or any adjacent neighbors that offered up concerns at that meeting?
No concerns were expressed at the meeting. No one else attended. I held the meeting, Zoom meeting open for 30 minutes, just in case someone was late and no one showed up. And I figured that probably because it's such a minor issue, 10 by 20 foot storage shed on private property that isn't impacting anybody in the neighborhood. So there weren't any protests.
Thank you very much for your explanation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have one question. How many people actually use the lot in that apartment complex? Is that full all the time, or is it only partially full most of the time?
It's my understanding it's only partially full. And I wouldn't, it's more than 3/4 full when there's 100% occupancy, but it's never been an over parking problem. Does that
Thank you.
help?
Thank you. Is that all you have to say?
That is, in regards to the parking, yes.
Is there anyone else wishes to speak in favor of this case? Hearing none. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to this case? Hearing none. I will now close the, public hearing with regards to this case. So, is there, any questions or discussions?
Mr. Chairman, I don't really have any discussion. I would be prepared to make a motion if it would be appropriate.
Yes, that would be very appropriate. Thank you.
Well, given the minor extent of the request, I have no objection to it, and I'd recommend that, or make the motion to approve the request of variance to allow the construction of a new shed in the parking area, which will result in the reduction of the non-conforming number of motor vehicle parking spaces from 249 to 246 spaces, all as shown on the submitted plans. Subject to the following, the evidence presented to the board shows that there are special circumstances which were not self-imposed, which are applicable to the property and support the granting of the requested variance. As set forth in the staff report, Board of Adjustment findings 1 through 7 are found to be satisfactory. The variance will not be material detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood and is the minimum necessary to provide relief.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Call for a vote, please. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Anyone opposed? That's 4. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Good luck with your project. And that's that for that one.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Castro, can we have the second case, please?
Mr. Chair and members of the board, our second case is C10-24-04, Norgord Interior Remodel, AMS Enterprises LLC, 443 South Stone Avenue, HC3. The applicant's property is an approximately 7,800 square foot lot, zoned HC3 commercial, and is developed with a 1-story building. The applicant is proposing an interior remodel to accommodate a new group dwelling use. The applicant is requesting the following variance. 1, to delete the required number of off-street motor vehicle parking spaces, all as shown on the submitted plans. The engineering section of Planning and Development Services Department has no objections or adverse comments. In HPZ design review on November 2nd, 2023, the applicant applied for an HPZ review activity number SD-1123-00119 for proposed modifications to the windows and doors of the building. The application was reviewed by the Armory Park Historic Zone Advisory Board and the Tucson-Pima County Historical Commission Plans Review Subcommittee. Both the advisory board and subcommittee recommended approval to the Director of Planning and Development Services. On April 15th, 2024, the Director of Planning and Development Services approved the application with conditions related to windows, doors, and awnings. Planning and Development Services staff has no objection to the applicant's requested variance. It is the opinion of staff that there are special circumstances applicable to the property and that the deletion of required off-street parking spaces would not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitations upon other properties in the vicinity and zone, and would not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood. To date, we have received a total of 0 approvals and 1 protest. For the record, board members have been provided a copy of the protest. Mr. Chair, members of the board, this concludes staff's presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And have we have any questions for staff on that? Okay. Okay, I will now open the floor to anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this, what?
The applicant.
Right, the applicant.
The owner of 443 South Stone. I don't want to repeat too much of what the staff has already said, but when I purchased this property almost a year and a half ago, we did go through all the process for the historic, which we had passed. And when it did trigger the parking scenario for the interior permit is when I was directed to do the variance, which makes sense because this building has been there over 100 years. It's never had on-site parking. We are only decreasing the amount of parking that I actually keep in touch with the previous owner from the music school. They had over 130 students. I'm not sure how they pulled off the parking scenario at that time, but we are significantly decreasing the parking scenario from what it used to be. So if there's any questions, there's not much more I could add to what staff already had. There is 9 parking spots that do not require any kind of parking permit that are directly surrounding it, and about another 12, I believe, on 15th Street that do not have a parking permit required for that particular property. And I can't imagine all those parking spots would be used at the same time. The number of nine parking cars for 12 people is the max of what can be done there. It's highly unlikely that a max would ever be put in place, but it is sufficient for what it could be for the max. Other than that, like I said, we just significantly brought it back down to where I think is more practical from what it was.
Yeah, I've got a question for the applicant. I presume you had a neighborhood meeting before your submittal.
Yeah.
Could you tell us how that went?
Well, I sent off 130 letters and put signs up. And I had a response from 2 people only. One lady was across the street that responded, but her response was more or less just wanted to talk about an experience she had with the city and a fence she was putting up. The other person had some questions, but we kept going back and forth. And then he was set up for the Zoom meeting I set up. During the Zoom meeting, he was the only person that I thought was going to come. I kept the Zoom meeting open for 35 minutes. No one ever showed.
So there is one letter of opposition. I presume you've seen that letter.
I have not.
Oh, you have not? Okay, I was going to ask what your thoughts were on.
Yeah,
the
no, this
opposition.
is the first I've made aware of it.
We can provide you with a copy of that.
Yeah.
I think I have one. Oh, okay. If you want to approach. Yeah, and we can give you a minute to skim it and
Sure.
then tell us what your thoughts are.
Unless it was received in an email that I wasn't aware of, but this is my first knowledge of it. Regarding this, like the first paragraph, this kind of sounds like the lady I spoke to across the street. She's talking about the north side of 15th Street is, if this is her, that does have like a parking permit scenario. My side, the south side does not. So that's just kind of to respond to the first paragraph, what she was saying. And then she had mentioned that she had they had 250 students at the music school. I thought they had like 130, but according to her, 250, which always created a problem for her in the past, which we completely significantly reduced that. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm not seeing really how this applies to. I don't know, I'm not sure how much of this applies to our scenario.
Let me ask you, you indicated there are available enough spaces to account for your needs on, on the street.
Correct.
Are those spaces on your side of the street that are not, permit required?
Directly in front of my property.
Okay, okay, that's fine. That's all I wanted to get clarified.
Okay.
So I don't think we need any more comments on that letter if you don't have any.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't seem to apply too much to exactly my scenario. If anything, it's only making the scenario better.
Mm-hmm, okay. Okay, I think I'm satisfied. I would defer to the other members.
I have no questions other than what I asked at study session, so that's been resolved for me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for your time.
Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to speak in favor of this case? Is there now anyone in the audience wishing to speak against the case? See none. That being done, we will close the public hearing in this case.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I do think that the current proposed use is a great improvement over the previous use and intensity of the parking issue. And I believe that what's being asked for is reasonable, especially considering that the required number would only be 8 spaces. And it appears that there is that number available off-site. And so I'm in support of this move for the variance. If there's any other comments, I'll wait to make a motion.
I don't think there are any more comments, so
No,
please make a
none.
motion.
We're waiting.
Okay, I'd like to move that we grant the variance in case C10-2404 to delete the number of off-street motor vehicle parking spaces as shown on the submitted plans. They are asking to delete all the number of on-site parking spaces, which would have been the number 8 required. The evidence that we've seen today shows that there are special circumstances, this being a historic property that's seen a change of use over the years. And these are not self-imposed and are applicable to the property and support the granting of the requested variance. Specifically, I would say that they're not asking for any special privileges. I'm assuming that if parking becomes a problem for the residents of your facility, that you'll seek a parking permit through Park Tucson to enable your tenants to be able to park near where they live. I feel that because this is a historic property and we don't want to do much to change the look of the property itself, that this is a reasonable request. And I think the variance with the that's been requested here will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or to the residents who live in the surrounding area or injurious to other properties or improvements. And it does appear to be the minimum necessary to provide relief.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote, please. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you for your presentation, and good luck with your project. Yes, sir.
I have a question, Mr. Castro. At the very beginning, I was a little confused. Am I understanding that we will have a meeting next month if we have a quorum and there'll be 2 cases?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, to set August 28th.
August 28th, and if you could let me, I'll send out an email for a quorum check. If you could just let me know by the end of the week, I would appreciate it.
I would ask if tentatively, is there any conflicts that you all know of for that date right now? Okay, thank you.
Don't think so.
But we will ask first. We will still send out an email. I just thought I'd ask while we're here.
Are you aware of any movement towards filling these vacancies on our committee?
I don't have any updates right now.
So what words are missing an appointment?
It's Ward 4 and Ward 5. He was Ward 5.
I'm Ward 6. so-
Right? Yes, we can.
Okay,
Okay. We have a other business item.
huh?
We have another business item that we would like to, okay. An update on the TEP appeal.
Yes, so as the board will recall, last fall, it heard a matter involving TEP and its request. As the board will recall, last fall, it heard a case involving TEP and their request to have transmission lines above ground. The board upheld the city's determination that the transmission lines should be undergrounded. Following your determination, the TEP appealed to the Superior Court. And earlier this month, the Superior Court issued an under advisement ruling upholding the board's decision. I have copies of the decision here that I can share with you. While I'm here, though, I thought I would give a brief overview of what the court decided.
Been
So,
watching that in the news.
right, TEP was seeking to construct overhead transmission lines for approximately 3.5 miles of Keno Parkway, which is part of the Gateway Corridor Zone. And after the board upheld the city's determination that those transmission lines should be underground, TEP claimed that the project was simply an upgrade, not a new development, that the state preempted the city's ability to restrict construction of utility poles, and that the city was stopped based on prior representations from claiming anything other than that transmission lines can be overhead. The court in its ruling determined that the project is a new development, and it quoted a significant portion of the zoning administrator's determination. And I'll quote a brief portion of the court's ruling here. TEP admitted that there are no or very few existing transmission lines running along Keno at this time. There's no evidence in the record which indicates a broad definition of upgrade must be applied as opposed to a narrow one, and the lack of existing infrastructure and the scale of the development proposed by TEP indicate to the court that the project goes beyond the scope of an upgrade under the UDC. The zoning administrator and the board did not interpret the law. Regarding estoppel, the court said that the city's comments regarding the city's prior comments regarding the transmission lines were in reference to a different project, not the DeMoss Petrie project. And then regarding preemption, the court stated that while the law restricts the city's authority to enact laws that would have the effect from preventing someone from accessing utility services within the jurisdiction, it doesn't prevent the city from regulating how the utility expands or modifies its own network, so long as those regulations don't have the effect of restricting access. And the court was unable to locate any law which restricts the city's authority to regulate how transmission lines are constructed. And again, I have copies of the decision here that I can share with you. The TEP can appeal this further to the Arizona Court of Appeals Division 2. I believe they have until August 5th to do so. And as of today's date, they have not filed a notice of appeal.
Wow, they really don't want to bury those lines, do they? They really want to put those overhead, the worst kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, love a copy.
Yeah, yeah, good, good to have good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
they're building in the public right away. So it shouldn't be closed.
Good. Is that the only new business or other?
Is that the
business?
only other business?
That's all we
Yeah, is
have.
there any other business?
No other business.
No other business? Then, no working business, then we are done. Adjournment does not need to be moved, does it?
Just move to adjourn. That's all.
Okay, I'll move to adjourn then.
Yep.
We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.